To the situation in Ukraine now, people are still desperately fleeing the fighting in that country. The United Nations says by yesterday, over 1 million people had fled to neighbouring countries. Medecins Sans Frontieres, or Doctors Without Borders, says it's activated an emergency response. To tell us more about the work they do, MSF's James Kambaki joins us now for an update. So, James, just an update from your teams at the front lines, as it were, in the borders and the areas within Ukraine that you've been able to access. What is the message? What are they telling you? What is the humanitarian situation they are encountering?
At the moment, it's very difficult to ascertain what medical humanitarian needs are there because the situation is still volatile. We have refugees already crossing the borders. We have our teams already in Poland, in Moldova, in Hungary. Some already are ready to activate our emergency responses in Belarus and Russia. And they have actually said that the impact of this humanitarian conflict is actually now being felt. So many people have crossed the border, and our teams have actually encountered some of them who are very dehydrated, hypothermic, and some of crossing the border through by foot, by buses, by any means they could to actually cross the border. So we are creating scenarios that will enable us to escalate anytime the response as soon as we have access to this situation inside and also within the border areas.
Yeah, James, just talk to me a bit more then about the other details of your emergency response plan. You've spoken about what you're planning in the countries bordering Ukraine, but what about the situation inside Ukraine? There was the second round of talks between delegations from Russia and Ukraine yesterday, and one of the things that came through was the need to create humanitarian corridors. How important is that for you to be able to gain access inside Ukraine itself?
It's very important. Our teams have been in Ukraine since 2014 when there was a previous conflict there. We have been providing surgical kits to different various health facilities. At the moment, the situation is still, we cannot be able to access many areas. And our team is actually preparing those scenarios so that we can step up as much as possible. The supply to send supplies also is still very difficult. Our teams that were on ground, we had to halt our activities. We used to support activities in eastern part of Ukraine, and in Kiev, we actually been supporting in providing those particular kits. But the situation is still very, very volatile. We can't really expand as quickly as we want. We really want to support all the vulnerable population, no matter who they are, where they come from, as we wait to see how we can actually gain more access to the vulnerable population. So far, it's been quite difficult to escalate or to expand in providing those. Our emergency teams are already on ground because we have been there since 2014. So it's much more easier for us to respond as quickly as possible.
One of the cities that has been in the focal point is the city of Mariupol in Ukraine itself. And I see that you've been providing what is called telemedicine training for trauma care for 30 surgeons from eastern Ukraine. What does that entail? Telemedicine training, is it what I'm thinking of?
Yes, it's actually offering those specific trainings at a distance. Because this is really a critical time where we have to adapt to the situation. So those who are on ground, what do? We can't just sit and wait while the situation does not permit us to escalate as we want to. So we try any way possible to assist the population. So This training has been offered to that is surgeons to provide those facilities, and if they need more support in terms of the telemedicine. So telemedicine is the training that we offer. But if there is specific consultation that needs to be done, we offer that also.
But James, I guess I wanted you to unpack what telemedicine involves. Is it about those teams, those surgeons who are on the ground being able to assist people by telephone because of the difficulty of navigating in this conflict situation? Or is it about training the doctors themselves, the surgeons, to be able to respond to the needs as and when they come in?
Yeah, initially it was the training. First, it has to be the training. And then secondly, it has to be continuous consultation between two specialists who are actually operating on a particular case at different times. So it's first of all, it was a mass training that was done for those 30. But then we actually have to follow up with specific cases if they require specific attention to actually address one or two particular cases that is of surgical importance.
With your presence in Ukraine since 2014, as you told us, since the initial conflict, and the teams that are there, you've described the difficulty of operating there at the moment. But what are they telling you about the kind of humanitarian situation they're encountering around the whole issue of medical emergencies that are emerging in the heavy fighting that is happening in many parts of Ukraine? What are they telling you? What are they seeing on the ground?
At the moment, communication is also quite hampered. What happens is that our team on 1st of March, they were able to access and go into Kiev. We're still waiting to hear what they tell us about that. But the continuous situation that we actually preparing is like the influx of refugees. What happens is when there is overcrowding, what happens is when there is challenges of shelter, sanitation, and all those that encompass mass exodus of people or mass when people stay in one particular place. So far, we have seen a lot of people with dehydration, hypothermia, because it's still very cold, and we are trying to address that. We have provided in Poland, one of the shelters, we have provided shelter kits in one of those shelters to actually support in this particular mass movement of people. There are people who are actually have crossed, so they are refugees, but there is also displacement within Ukraine that we are assessing.
All right, I've got to thank you for your time and your insights here on Today. That's James Kambaki from Doctors Without Borders, giving us an update on the kind of humanitarian response that the organization is planning to step up in that situation in Ukraine.